things understandable. Do join me. We'll have a lot of fun together.
Weekdays at 5:45 on KSJE. KSJE is supported by San Juan Regional Medical Center, here to meet your urgent and emergent medical needs, whether they are COVID-19 related or not. Medical emergencies happen when you least expect them, whether it's a stroke, heart attack, illness, or injury. San Juan Regional Medical Center's caregivers are here to provide care to you and your loved ones. Find out more online at sanjuanregional.com. Morning, June 17th, 2021. Good morning, everybody. I'm Scott Michlin. Thanks for tuning in to KSJE 90.9 FM over the air here in San Juan County, New Mexico, 103.3 FM over the air in Durango, Colorado, and of course streaming everywhere on the planet, including your smart speaker from our website, KSJE.com. Welcome also to our viewers who are watching this visual radio program. The video is streaming live this morning out to the KSJE Facebook page, our YouTube channel, and our Twitter account. So we're glad that you are with us as well this morning, everybody, because my guests in the next few moments from San Juan County, we're going to be talking about a proposal to increase gross receipts taxes and why we are talking about doing that and what that money would be used for, the dispatch center and the communication center. My guests will talk about all of those things and much more coming up in the next few moments right here on KSJE today. Then, of course, we want to remind you that at 9 a.m. this morning, it is our COVID-19 Community Information Program. Megan Cullop will be joining me here in Studio A. We have a big show lined up because this is going to be our last regular COVID-19 information program. So you'll see it live this morning on social media at 9. You'll hear it on the radio this afternoon at 5:06 p.m. But take a look at those guests. Dr. David Scrace from the state of New Mexico, Dr. Bob Underwood, San Juan Regional Medical Center, the one and only Devin Neely from San Juan County, and the one and only Liesl Dees from San Juan College. So we are looking forward to that program to update you on the latest information, of course, and a little bit of a look back at the last, what has it been, 15 months of COVID-19 community information programs. I believe we have produced about 126 of those since this whole pandemic began. But we hope you'll join us for that program coming up live at 9 a.m. on our social media platforms today on KSJE. On the radio at 9, Mick Hess will take us roving with the arts, our classical music program. And this morning, Mick is featuring music from Felix Mendelssohn on Roving with the Arts today. Don't forget, of course, you can also connect with KSJE on Instagram in addition to our other social media platforms. And let's talk about the weather, shall we? It is sunny at the moment with a current temperature of 74 degrees outside our studios here at San Juan College. Partly sunny skies in the forecast for today, another triple-digit day, 100 degrees for a high this afternoon, maybe a scattered shower popping up overnight tonight with a low of 65 degrees, partly sunny tomorrow on Friday with a high of 96, maybe another shower overnight, low 65, sunshine 96 on Saturday, 98 and sunny on Sunday, 97 on Monday. More 90s for the rest of the week, as you can see, and overnight lows mostly in the 60s. So the weather is nice for sleeping, at least. But the days are certainly hot, and there is certainly heat advisories in effect for much of our state. Let me turn to my guests who are here with me this morning. We'll start talking about this proposal to increase gross receipts taxes in San Juan County. County Manager Mike Stark is here. Always great to have him here, not just because he brings me coffee, but because he's a great guest. Mr. Stark, good morning.
Good morning, Scott. Pleasure to be here, as always.
Thanks for coming in, and thank you for the coffee.
You bet.
It's very nice of you to do. Dave Ripley's also here. He is the manager of the Communication Center in Aztec for San Juan County. Dave, good morning to you.
Good morning, Scott. Good to be here.
Good to have you back with us as well. And let's start by talking a little bit about this proposal to increase the gross receipts tax in San Juan County by, and Mike Stark, correct me, and how much of a 16th are we talking about again today?
So it's a 1/16th countywide
Thank you.
Gross receipts tax, and It's a tax that all of our taxes, as you know, local increments that have the ability to put in place. Some of which are not voter approved. Some of which are voter approved. This is one that's a voter approved increment, but that authority is granted to us by the state of New Mexico, and so that is one of those increments that we are looking to bring forth to the voters and share with them the dilemma that we're in with this tax that's specific, as you mentioned, to just funding two things, and that's the 911 Consolidated Dispatch Center and then the EMS ambulance service here that's provided to the citizens in San Juan County.
Very good. And this 1/16th is a small increment, and you know the math better than I do because fractions was never my strong suit. But this amounts to how much money are we talking about on a dollar that we spend at the store, let's say?
Yeah, so in a $20 purchase, it equates to a little over a penny, 1.25 cents.
Okay.
For a 16th.
And I know that it doesn't sound like a lot of money. There are folks that may be watching us and listening this morning. Any tax increase kind of gets their ire up and they get concerned about it. Mm-hmm. And so we'll talk about the reasons behind it in just a moment. But I do understand that any increase is an increase, and that's certainly something that to note. But Dave Ripley, let me come to you and talk a bit about the work of the Communication Center and EMS. And of course, we have a huge county. We are the size of the state of Connecticut, and it is the job of the San Juan County Communications Authority to be there 24/7, 365, to answer these 911 calls and non-emergency calls to get help where it is needed when it's needed.
Right, yeah, it's a big operation. We're probably the second largest in the state of New Mexico, and we're covering a large area, 5,500 square miles, and anything that's public safety related, we're dispatching for, except for the Navajo Reservation.
Right. And as Mike Stark mentioned, you are a consolidated dispatch center, so you are working with almost every law enforcement entity, except for the Navajo Nation necessarily, in San Juan County. Isn't that true?
Right, yeah. We do all law enforcement. We don't dispatch primarily for state police currently. We have in the past. But we still interact with them. They still work with us. We also provide limited services to the U.S. Marshals and FBI and a lot of other agencies around the area.
And a lot of other communities have a consolidated center like ours, and I think the data has shown that it's really cost effective to have all these agencies working out of one center than have a dispatch center for Farmington Police and Aztec Police and Bloomfield Police, and the Sheriff's Office has a dispatch center, and those types of things, because you can all talk to each other, they can all communicate with each other, your dispatchers know kind of what's going on regionally or countywide.
Right, yeah. It can be cost saving in the long run, but the really major benefit for a consolidated 911 dispatch center is the ability to communicate with each other. So as events move through different jurisdictions or other jurisdictions need assistance, it's all there in one room. And but the technology is very expensive these days, and it would be completely cost prohibitive for individual entities to afford that kind of technology.
Sure. Well, and I think about the smaller communities maybe that don't have as much resources as others to be able to afford even something even slightly matching what you're able to do at the dispatch center.
Right. Well, you know, a lot of dispatch centers around New Mexico and across the country are so small that they cannot afford to do the kind of training that the public expects, the level of professionalism. We're an accredited agency with the International Association of Emergency Medical Dispatch, and we're only one of, I think it's less than 200 911 dispatch centers worldwide that have met their level of accreditation. So
that's significant.
We're pretty proud of that.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot to maintain that standard.
Congratulations. And I would imagine that some of the technology that you were talking about that is expensive are some of the maybe things that we take for granted, that maybe some things like the reverse 911 technology or the triangulation of a 911 call, that if someone can't speak to a dispatcher, you can still get a fairly good idea of where they're calling from and where to send help because of some of this technology that you have in place.
Right. So we were the first in the state of New Mexico to install Smart 911 software on our equipment. And what that allowed was for people to go in ahead of time online and on a secure site, enter critical information. It could be medical information. It could be things like my home is hard to find and here's directions to it. Once they enter that information, and they have to update it every 6 months, so we know that it's current, when we receive a call from them, it pops up on the dispatcher screen and they have all this information. And even more to the point, we know we have a large population in New Mexico of speech and hearing impaired folks. And how do they use the telephone? How do they contact 911? So with Smart 911, they're able to contact us and we can immediately engage a texting session with them. So right now, if they were in their home, they could do video relay service. But once they're away from home, they have no way to contact 911, except here in San Juan County. We have that ability to interact with them in that way, and we do have several people here that utilize that resource. So that's just one of many things that we do.
Right, and they're not cheap.
No, they're
setting
not.
up at your end, right, to be able to do these things.
They're not cheap, and costs keep rising over the years. We try to keep our budget balanced and not grow it any more than we have to. So each year we have to really make some hard decisions about what are we going to be able to pay for, what can we not pay for. We try to look at the highest priorities, and our goal as a 911 dispatch center is to provide the highest level of service to the community that we possibly can.
Right, and we were talking about this before we came on the air this morning, I think, with both of you gentlemen, about the budget at the Communication Center, and that the increases, I don't think, have been very much over the years. Mike Stark, has it been a kind of a flat budget?
No, Scott, that's completely accurate. You look back over a 10-year period, generally speaking, the revenues from the tax, from the 3/16 that's in place today, existing tax that's been
That's
here
what's
since,
been decided to fund the 911 Center and EMS in
Correct.
San Juan County.
Since 2002, it was approved by the voters in 2002, reaffirmed by the voters in 2013.
Okay.
By the way, a rate of percentage rate of 92 to 8%. So it was pretty significant. The support it received from the voters in San Juan County. And I think that's because folks see the value in the services being provided. But you're right. It's roughly, it had been $7 million in revenues coming in and about the same in expenditures annually. And then here in the last 5 years, we've seen a pretty significant decline, not just in this increment, but countywide, the municipalities. Of course, COVID certainly only enhanced that decline, and it's about 20%. And so, where we're at today, we've been judicious with the expenditures, and there's two separate boards. Mr. Ripley has a board primarily made up of law enforcement and the fire professionals
Right.
here in our community that they're the ones that use the system.
Sure.
Makes sense they're overseeing it. And then there's an oversight board on the EMS side of the house, and then ultimately the county commission's the fiscal agent for these proceeds. And so but a combined effort from all those entities to make sure that we're using those dollars, like I mentioned, as judiciously as possible, that we're still able to provide the same level of services to the citizens. Actually, as Mr. Ripley's talking about, enhancing the services with technology. I mean, that's always our goal. We want to be on the cutting edge of providing top-of-the-line communications, top-of-the-line EMS and ambulance services, and making sure that we have the resources that both of those entities need to do their jobs and to do them well. Because our citizens expect that. When they're in their worst of times, their biggest time of need,
Sure.
who are they calling? They're calling 911. And if it's a medical emergency, who's responding? It's the ambulance service, and we want to make sure that those operations are adequately funded. And yes, this 1/16 that's being asked to be put in front of the voters. That's what our county commission's having to decide right now. We think it's a pretty small percentage in order to maintain these valuable services that folks depend on.
Right, and I do want to make clear that I think what you're saying and what you've told us is that the budget for the dispatch center and EMS has not really risen that much in the last 20 or so years, it's stayed fairly stable. What has changed is the decline of this revenue stream from this dedicated percentage of gross receipts tax.
Correct.
That's what's caused this latest conversation. Is that where we are?
Expenditures have remained flat, even with inflation,
Okay.
which is amazing. And just a testament to the job that both entities have done to maintain expenditures. But yes, revenues have fallen, putting us in this predicament. And we'd like to know from the voters sooner than later, because because of the judicious use of these dollars, we've built up a cash reserve that we've been leaning on, hoping that things economically would improve. Of course, COVID was a real, no pun intended, shot in the arm to. Not in a positive way.
I'd say punch in the gut.
Punch in the gut. Yeah, I think that's a better way to
there you go.
state
Yes,
it.
sir.
Thank you.
We're going to use metaphors. Let's do it.
But that has been provided us this enhanced difficulty that we need to know in advance, because the process, it takes time to get a question approved by the county commission, to get that put towards the Secretary of State, ultimately put on a ballot November 2nd for the election for the voters to consider. And then depending upon whether they say yay or nay, if they say yes, we want to see this imposed to continue these valuable services. We wouldn't see collections of those dollars until July of next year, and actually wouldn't see receipts of those dollars until September. And so we, in essence, have about a year and a half worth of reserves. And so we really need to have an answer from the voters on the value of these services and whether they want to see this tax increased to cover the operations. And I should add that the taxing authority provided from the state is 0.25%. And I wish we had our historian here who has been there from day one, Mr. Duncan, George Duncan, from city manager of the city of Bloomfield, but
Right,
also the chair of the Communications Authority Board. He was here from day one, working to put all this together, and actually was part of the legislation to get the tax approved. And they didn't institute the 0.25% back in 2002. It was determined that 3/16 would cover the needs of both operations, and it has for a significant period of time. But now, as things have changed, we've seen a decline in some economic activity. Of course, the challenges of always keeping current with technology. Now there's a need to put this in front of the voters, and in about a third of the counties in the state have imposed such a tax, and almost the majority of them, since the majority, almost all of them have imposed the full 0.25%, been imposed by the voters.
Gotcha. So this would give you a little bit more wiggle room, I guess, in the future if you ever needed to go back to the voters for additional funds or things like that. You're not asking for the maximum that you could be asking for.
Well, it would be the maximum allowed per state law. If the voters approved it, it's 0.25%.
The quarter, but
We're at 3/16. You add a 16th to that. I know this is a math problem, and it's early.
I'm staying with you.
But
okay.
if you add those two together, we get to a 0.25%.
There you go, 4/16, which is a quarter. I got it. Thank you. But that's significant, I think, and worth talking about for sure. And so just for folks who are watching us and listening this morning, the reason we're on the air is because the County Commission is going to be dealing with this next month, early next month, and if they approve putting this question on the ballot, then then the voters will be asked to say yay or nay to this in the fall. But the first stop is the County Commission, and if
Yes.
folks have one feeling one way or the other, they need to let their commissioner know, I guess. to
Absolutely.
either
That's why we're
support
here.
this or what have you.
Scott, thank you, and that's why we're here. We want to make certain that the voters of San Juan County, the citizens of San Juan County, have the opportunity to contact their commissioners and let them know how they feel about putting this question on the ballot. That's the decision they have before them, July 6th. We introduced this item 2 meetings ago.
Right.
Put a notice of intent, because we have to do it via adoption of an ordinance. And so we let the voters know the citizens know this is being considered, and then July 6th they would take final action on it. So we are making the rounds to all the municipalities to let them know about what this is about and what's at stake. And the city of Bloomfield has already taken action in supporting the county commission and putting this on the ballot. We appeared in front of the Aztec City Council. I think they're going to take final action on a resolution of support next week, and then we'll be actually at the city of Farmington as well. next week, sharing this message with their council. So,
Gotcha.
and hoping that they'll support the county commission in this effort.
Right. Very good. Dave Ripley, let me turn back to you a little bit about the work that your dispatchers do, as we mentioned, and as Mike Stark mentioned, that, they're almost always talking to folks maybe during their worst times. There's an emergency and they're having a health problem or a disaster or something's going on, and they're calling 911, and they're talking to your folks who are trained to respond to a variety of calls, and that's important, A, and B, as I mentioned at the beginning of the program, they are there 24/7, 365. I mean, you don't want those phones to go unanswered ever, and that's why you have your staff the way you are.
Right. These dispatchers here in this communication center are probably the highest trained in the state. There are no dispatch centers that have higher training or higher levels of training for their dispatchers. And they're certified medically to diagnose medical problems over the phone, to help people treat while we're sending responders. Things like maintaining airways, doing CPR, delivering children, all kinds of things.
You have examples of all of those things, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely.
That have happened.
Yes, definitely. I think really the important thing that Mike and I'd like to get across today to the community is what's in it for them. That's a legitimate question for them to ask. And I think people should understand it's not a matter of if you will ever call 911, it's when. Virtually everyone in this community has either called 911 for some sort of emergency, or they know someone close to them that has. And we're handling 1,000 calls a day. And one of the impacts, if this tax is not approved by the public, this 1 cent per every $20 spent, if it's not approved, we're not going to be able to maintain the same level of services. And if that's the case, there could be other financial impacts to the public, such as ISO ratings for insurance. So if we're not able to meet the standards because we just don't have the people, we can't afford the training and those sorts of things, their insurance rates could go up. And I would imagine the insurance rates would go up more than what this penny per $20 spent would cost them. And so I think that's really important. I had a person approach me the other day and kind of grumble at me that, oh, you're trying to dig into my pockets again for more tax money. And he was grumpy enough that I didn't want to pursue the conversation at that point. But,
right.
It is important for people to understand things increase in cost over time. And so you want to mitigate that as much as you can by putting your dollars where they make the most sense. And in this case, this small, minute increase in tax really reaps big benefits overall, benefits that a lot of people don't realize.
Sure, until they use the service, and then they realize, oh my
Right.
gosh, I was able to call 911, and even though I couldn't talk to them, they knew where to find me in my ditch
Right.
in my car when I drove off the road or whatever
Right.
the case may be.
Right.
And I know that your dispatchers are being asked to do a lot more, and probably part of that is with their training and things like that of trying to diagnose some of these things, or almost some social work at some times and medical work at other times. And I mean, they are cross-trained in a lot of different things, because when they answer that phone, they don't know what the nature of the call is until they start talking to that individual. It could be anything.
Right.
It could be somebody just calling up to ask where their pizza is, I suppose. Do you get calls like that?
We do get calls like that. Not
God
everything
bless your
is an
dispatchers having to
absolutely
deal with stuff like that.
Not everything's an absolute emergency, but the other day, as an example, we had a call of a missing child. I believe the child was 5, and he was later found in the neighbor's septic tank. And that had a huge impact on our
Of course.
dispatchers. Back in 2017, we had the Aztec school shooting. Most of my people had children in that school or knew people
Right.
in that building, and they did an absolutely amazing job. And so it's not like working at a fast food restaurant or a store or something like that. They have people's lives in their hands, and it takes a huge toll on them. I've been doing this for 37 years now, and I can still remember the first person that I talked to 37 years ago that was killed And if I heard her voice today, I would still recognize it. That takes a toll on you, and people don't want to do that kind of work. So it's hard to find people, and we need to be able to hire the best professionals that we can, because I think when the public has an emergency and they call 911, they're expecting to have a highly trained, dedicated, committed professional. And I'm sorry, but it takes money.
Right. Well, and the training, I think, is really important to help your dispatchers deal with some of those highly emotional calls that they get.
Absolutely.
That some are on the phone with people for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, waiting for help to arrive, and they are that link to hope that someone's coming to help them.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I take a lot of pride in the fact that we provide more training than any other dispatch center in the state of New Mexico. In fact, I've had directors from around the nation call me when they've heard the kind of training that we do to find out how they can do that kind of training in their own centers. But it takes a lot of effort. It takes some money. But the public deserves that. They deserve that level of service because their lives are on the line.
Right. Well, it's important, I think, for the community to understand the work that you all do, where this money is going, even though it's a tax increase, again, a penny on $20. I think most budgets can afford that. I know for some folks, any increase is a concern. But to hear what it is used for, and the fact that if you're not paying it there, and if you pay more in increased insurance costs, that wouldn't be good for your budget either.
Right, absolutely. And this tax is a good tax in that, I'm like anyone else. I hate paying taxes for the most part, though I understand that we need to pay some money, to maintain our community and services and things like that. But, a lot of taxes, they get collected from us, and then they're spent on things that don't benefit our community, or they're things that we don't agree with, or whatever. This tax can only be used for 911, EMS, and behavioral health eventually.
Gotcha. And that's an important distinction, I think. And it's important to note that money can't be taken away either. I mean, if the state's having a rough year, that is a dedicated revenue source for your department and EMS, and as you mentioned.
Yeah, it's not like the surcharge that people pay on their cell phones. That's 51 cents a month, and that's collected at the state level and comes back to the dispatch centers. I get a little over $600,000 a year from the state from that. We just did a phone upgrade, was $886,000. All of that came from that surcharge. But when things have gotten rough in the state, a couple of times they've raided the fund and taken...
I'm shocked. I'm shocked to hear you say that, Dave Ripley. I can't imagine the state would do that.
They've taken about $8 million from the state E911 fund.
Right. They can't do that.
But they can't do that with us.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah.
Mike Stark, you've been waiting to get a word in edgewise here with Dave and I talking about over here. Yes, sir.
Well, I just thought I'd add that it's how the taxes, how is it collected, who's it collected from.
Right.
I think that's really important too. It's a gross receipts tax, and we're blessed in our area to have a trade area of 300,000 people who come here to purchase goods and services, who also are using the services, by the way, of the 911 dispatch center and the ambulance service. And so to have a tax that's collected that way, most folks in our area would say that's a better way to be taxed than property taxes. Let's do it because we have this great trade area. Let's do it that way versus another way.
It's shared among everyone who is in this area buying goods or services in the county.
And here's whether this, we're obviously hoping that the voters see the value in this and will want to see the slight increase on their gross receipts tax rate. But at the end of the day, we've got to fund this operation. The joint powers agreement that the county and the three cities of Farmington, Aztec, and Bloomfield have in place today, this would fall back on those entities if it's not funded. And you think, well, gosh, what does that mean? Well, what that would mean potentially at the county levels, we wouldn't have another means by which, through a gross receipts tax, the most fair way of taxation, at least for most folks' perspective here, to lean on. We'd have to look at other means, which unfortunately would mean property taxes. And I think the majority of folks here don't want to see that. I know our commission is very respective of that because we're the second lowest for the county imposed mill rate, the second lowest in the state out of 33 counties. So they want to maintain that distinction and maintain that low mill rate. And so I think this was, once folks have the complete picture on what this service means to them in their life, and Mr. Ripley pointed out, at some point they're either going to directly use the service or somebody they know is going to use it. And I can assure you, I had a little faux pas on a mountain bike last summer and got my first ride in an ambulance to San Juan Regional, and I can tell you it was...
You're one of those people now.
I was one of those people.
Yeah.
I wasn't before, but it was just a fantastic... It wasn't say it's a fantastic experience. It wasn't going over the handlebars of the mountain bike.
Maybe that wasn't so fantastic.
But
getting
the ride to the hospital
response
and the response was just first class, and it touched me so much. I made it a point to send thank you notes to everybody involved, because it's when you're in your time of need, boy, you want folks to be there, to respond to the call, and to provide you a high level of service. And we're blessed to have both of these organizations doing that on behalf of the citizens here.
Very true. Sending a thank you note to EMS is the most Mike Stark thing I've ever heard Mike Stark doing, but I'm not surprised. But it makes perfect sense. And I assume that the accident didn't happen in the middle of town somewhere, Mike Stark, probably out in the boonies somewhere, and that was, again, maybe why it was so important to have response coming to you to...
Fortunately, not too far out
scoop you up
the
and get you
boonies,
to
but
help.
it was just north of
Okay.
PV on the Anasazi Trail.
I got you.
But
Very good.
still required some difficulty in extracting
Gotcha.
me from the trail.
Well, we're glad that you are in good health now, and they got you all back on the mend. Before we run out of time, gentlemen, thank you very much. Dave Ripley, always great to talk to you about the work that you and your dispatchers do. Mike Stark, I wanted to ask you one other thing about the drought declaration that the county has issued as of, I believe, yesterday, right? We all know triple digits, sunny, no rain in sight. We are in a drought.
Yeah, and
Obviously.
just extreme drought per the state's rating system. And so when you're evaluating those conditions, seeing how dry it is, we want to make sure there's good awareness to the public, and that was the first and foremost primary reason for doing that. Is we want to make sure that our citizens countywide know where we stand as it relates to drought. That we hope that everybody can find the way to conserve water as best as they can, so that we can make it through the really lean months of August and September. If we're not going to see monsoon rains like we normally do, and then the other thing it does, if there is a need for a county level response, if we're having to be in a situation where we're hauling water or there's a big wildland fire that breaks out, it would open up state and federal funding to the local governments to help fight that crisis. But really, when you just look overall at the conditions around us, Montezuma County recently took action in Colorado. McKinley County followed suit with what we're doing. The state of New Mexico actually took the lead in December in declaring a drought. It's important for folks to be aware of what's going on, and let's be safe this 4th of July. Safe use of fireworks. Go to McGee Park. That's a great place to go if you need to go.
If you want to shoot off fireworks safely, the county has opened McGee Park, will be opening McGee Park for that, using the paved parking lot. That's the safest place you can do that. Watch some of the other professional shows, I think, is the other advice that folks would give, to say, take your family to see. I think we've got 3 shows planned, as far as I understand it, the 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Whether it's in Farmington, B Square Ranch, or Bloomfield. So I think there's plenty of professional shows in the area to enjoy as well. But gentlemen, in the meantime, stay safe and stay well. Thank you both for coming in this morning. It's always great to talk to you and hear about the work that's being done, and let the residents know what's coming.
You bet. Good to see you, Scott.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My guest this morning from San Juan County, with me here on KSJE.